Welcome to People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst, and today we're joined by someone who has spent his career helping people communicate, lead, adapt, and grow through change. Dr. Danny Brassell is often called the Jim Carrey with a Ph.D. because of his energy, humor, and ability to connect with audiences around the world. Danny is a best-selling author of more than 20 books, an international keynote speaker, leadership coach, and educator who has spoken to over 3,500 audiences across 4 continents. He began his career teaching bilingual students in South Central Los Angeles and went on to become a tenured university professor, faculty advisor, television host, and co-founder of programs focused on leadership, storytelling, reading, and personal growth. Today, he helps entrepreneurs, executives, and organizations turn their experiences into compelling stories that inspire action and create results. Danny has worked with people from all walks of life, including many navigating major career and life transitions. And today, he's here to help us better understand how people can successfully move through change, whatever that transition was, if it was of their own choice or one forced upon them. Danny, welcome to People in Transition.
Wow, thanks so much for that kind introduction, Bob. I'm very impressed by myself.
You have a lot to be impressed with. So
Not at all.
let's jump right into these questions, Danny, if we could. First one that I thought of is kind of as a play on the title of my show here. When you hear the phrase people in transition in their careers, what does that mean to you personally?
Sounds like my autobiography. If I was going to write an autobiography, Bob, it would probably be called Pivots because I feel like I've already lived 9 lives. 30 years ago, I was a journalist covering President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election. I loved my job. I got to meet every editor of every major daily. And one editor offered me the City Beat for $16,500 a year. Meanwhile, a friend told me they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became an educator for the noblest of reasons, Bob, for the high pay. And I actually fell in love with teaching. I've taught all age levels from preschoolers all the way up to rocket scientists. I can make that claim because I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And in 2005, my wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything financially. And I could give you the woe is me story, but I'm a positive person. I learned a lot from that experience. First of all, I learned that my wife is my soulmate. I put her through the ringer and she stood right by me. She's a pretty incredible human being. Second of all, I learned that money's not everything, Bob, because you can lose money just like that. Third, I try not to judge other people because if I was somebody who saw what I had done, I would have said, well, you deserve that. But now I realize unless you know everything about a person, you really don't know anything about a person. Fourth, I became Christian, which I'm always embarrassed to confess it took a catastrophe. But the more I read the Bible, I realize I'm not the first screw up to find Jesus. And fifth, and probably most applicably to what we are doing today, I didn't want to file bankruptcy. And my accountant said, well, you have to earn this much more money this year. And so I started speaking on the side and I hit that number right on the number. Well, the next year, Bob, he gave me a much higher number. And I hit that number right on the number. So in year three, I thought, well, maybe I should set a higher number. And basically, during one of the worst economic downturns in world history, I was able to build up a highly lucrative speaking business, which eventually attracted the attention of some pretty famous people and companies who asked me to coach them. And I have to admit, I really resisted coaching for a long time, Bob, because you need to know this about me. I am obsessive compulsive. I will not let you fail. I will be on your back, holding you accountable until you succeed. Well, now that I work, like you said, with primarily entrepreneurs and business owners and executives who pay me a lot of money, I find that they are highly motivated. They do the work, and it's been some of the most gratifying work I've ever done. That's what drew me to your podcast is Transitions is my autobiography.
You mentioned that you work with entrepreneurs, with executives, educators, business owners, business leaders. What have you seen as the most common emotion that people who are experiencing transition in their jobs, what is the most common emotion that they face?
Well, obviously fear, not being comfortable with the uncomfortable, the unknown. And, I'm a big believer in when one door closes, a better door opens up. Really in my work with people I work with, I'm showing them how to use speaking to accelerate whatever it is that they want to do, whether they want to deliver a keynote to a ballroom or a venture capital fundraising effort to a boardroom, or they want to convince a jury in a courtroom. I had one of my clients, he gave his pitch in a restroom. Hopefully, he washed his hands afterwards. I want people to understand that there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable. That usually means you're on the right track.
So I've experienced that many people define themselves by their careers.
Mhm.
When that suddenly changes for them, how can they protect their confidence and identity as they're going through that transition? So that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question is, does this uncertainty about one's identity, is it tied to younger people, older people, males, females? Is there demographics around that uncertainty?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, Bob. Yes, I think that women do a much better job of not identifying themselves based on their careers. Men are usually much more apt to do that. I had read an autobiography by Bill Russell, the famous Boston Celtic center, and somebody asked him if he was a basketball player, and he said no. And his teammate looked at him. He said, "Why did you say that?" And he said, "Well, basketball is what I do. It's not who I am." I thought, wow. So, to answer the first part of your question, I think a lot of people need to embrace the power of the pause and really sit down and identify what are your virtues? Who are you? What do you stand for? And you've experienced this personally, Bob. You've gone all over the place and done all kinds of different things. And your life is meant to be a journey. You're meant to do lots of different things. There's nothing wrong with that. And before anybody's an expert, they're always an amateur. I guarantee you, transitioning from kindergarten to first grade is a big deal. But after a few days, you get used to it. I guarantee you, every college athlete, when they become a pro, they don't feel like they belong, but they eventually start to feel like that's their home. Even somebody entering the Oval Office, I guarantee you, they have imposter syndrome those first couple of days. The quote, I think it was Harry Truman when he was a senator, he got in the Senate elevator, and I think it was Sam Rayburn who he saw him, and Harry Truman was just awestruck by all these senators around him. And I think it was Rayburn who said, "Don't worry, Harry. The first 6 months you're going to wonder how you got here, and the rest of your term you're going to wonder how the rest of us got here." So I think that's pretty good.
You mentioned imposter syndrome. Can you help our listeners understand what that is and the impact that it has on your transition?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started speaking, I definitely had imposter syndrome, and because I'm like, well, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to me. And what I always tell my clients is you really want to start with the lowest hanging fruit and hang out with your own tribe. So I had been a inner city public school teacher, and so I started my speaking career by speaking specifically to inner city public school teachers. And then I was able to expand to all public school teachers, and then not just teachers, but administrators, and then to parents. And then in one of my masterminds, I was the only person at the table that was a teacher. And one of the gentlemen in my mastermind owns a very lucrative company. And he asked me if I would do a motivational speech for his salespeople. And I looked at him, I said, "I don't really think I'm qualified to do that." And he looked at me like I was a nitwit, Bob. He's like, "If you can get inner city teenage boys to read Shakespeare, I'm pretty sure you can motivate my sales team." And he did me a huge favor, Bob. He got me expanding my horizons. And I think that's what the value of always having a coach or a mentor is somebody else to kind of show you, hey, you're a little bit better than where you think you are. I mean, I used to tell my little ones, I'd say, sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. So let's go out and make this world a better place. I believe when you have people surrounding you telling you that enough, you start believing it.
What have you seen, Danny, as the biggest mistake people make immediately after losing a job or going through some type of unexpected professional change?
Well, it's kind of like losing a significant other or whatever. You go through all the different stages of depression. At first, you're in shock, and then you get very depressed, and then you get very angry, and eventually you get indifferent. And so I want people to really embrace that indifference when they realize that there's other things, bigger pastures ahead for them. But it's perfectly normal to feel shocked. I've been fired from jobs. I have a big mouth on me, and you never feel good when you lose a position or you've been downsized or something. But things always tend to work out for me. And I find with most people, if they have the proper attitude and they keep on looking for the opportunities in front of them, then they'll thrive.
Danny, you talk about the power of storytelling. How important is storytelling for you to share with others, as well as storytelling to tell yourself?
Yeah, I love that question, Bob. I think the story you tell yourself is very important. When people ask, they say, "Oh, I'm not a leader." I'm like, well, at the very minimum, you're leading yourself. So, what's the story that you're telling yourself? And I believe in telling yourself a positive story, not an unrealistic story, but it was General Eric Shinseki. He was the first Asian American four-star general in the Army, and he has one of my favorite quotes. He said, "If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less." And the fact is that change is the one thing that's inevitable all the time. And so you kind of have to go with the flow. I'm still enjoying my journey. I'll probably have three more careers after this. In terms of speaking and storytelling, of all people, it was Joseph Stalin who said a million dead is a statistic, one person dead is a tragedy. Translation, facts tell, but stories sell. Facts inform, stories transform. I'm a big believer in turning my clients' numbers into narratives because people think with their heads, but they make buying decisions with their emotions.
And it's kind of like joke telling. If I don't think I'm a good joke teller, I probably won't use that tool. I think storytelling can be the same. How can you build that muscle?
Yeah, that's great. I love that you said that it's a muscle, Bob, because it's definitely a muscle. It's a skill that can be worked on. I work, most of the people I work with, they either don't want to speak or they're actually terrified of speaking. I'm working with a woman right now, and she shakes uncontrollably on stage, and she was asking me what she could do to control it. And my suggestion was tell everybody that you're nervous. She's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Bob, you and I have been to presentations when a person is bombing, and there is nothing worse than being at a bad presentation because the entire room feels uncomfortable and time stands still and you just want to get out of there. And when you actually just fess up to your nervousness, I told her, I'm like, tell everybody you feel like you're going to pee your pants because I guarantee you the audience, they're going to start cheering you on, say, no, you can do this. Comedians are the best at this. If you look at Kevin Hart, he's a short black guy. So he tells a lot of jokes about being a short black guy. Jim Gaffigan's a big fat white guy. So he tells a lot of jokes about being a big fat white guy. What they've done ingeniously is they've taken their perceived weakness and they've made fun of it. So now it actually is viewed as a strength. There's a lot of power in that. I didn't work with either President Biden or President Trump on their campaigns, but if they had hired me with President Biden, I would have said, make fun of your age. I can't remember anything. I'm so dang old. People would just laugh at him. Oh, there's Joe, Forgetful Joe. That's our Uncle Joe. It wouldn't have been an issue. If I had been working with President Trump, I would have said, make fun of your humility. Nobody is humbler than me. I'm the most humble person on the planet. When you take what other people perceive as your weakness and you make fun of it, now they laugh with you, not at you. It's a real strength. And so that's one of the things that I work with people on is, I'm working with a gentleman right now, and he works with a large Silicon Valley firm. He's doing a venture capital fund. He's trying to raise $80 million, and he's the sweetest guy in the world. He's an engineer. And Bob, you and I know engineers are kind of introverted people. And he's an Indian gentleman. He's like, Danny, please, you have to make me funny. People need to listen to me. And so he has a very difficult name to pronounce. I'm not going to tell you his real name. And so all we did to tweak his presentation is at the beginning of his presentation, he says, hello, my name is Shubhanakar Majahardeen. Gee, I sure hope I'm saying that correctly. And what it does is it gets everybody to just smile and nod like, oh, this is a person that doesn't take themselves too seriously. Everybody likes to be around a person like that. And that's why I like to use humor in presentations rather than the fear tactics that so many people seem to use nowadays.
I had a boss once that told me that 95% of any audience that you're making a speech or presentation to wants you to succeed. They didn't come to listen to you mess it up or fail. And that has stuck with me forever. So
I love that. That's great.
I agree with you. Danny, how can someone shift from feeling rejected, defeated, even embarrassed to seeing their job transition as a real opportunity and a door opener for themselves?
Yeah, so I view this the exact same way as when I'm coaching people and speaking. I say there's only two ways to get better at speaking. First of all, you got to watch lots of speakers. I mean, I watch 10 speakers a day. I watch politicians, I watch comedians, I watch televangelists. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women. Here, I'll give you a ninja strategy. I watch a lot of televised award shows because When the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with the audience. I want to see how they use their time. Now, most people, they waste their time. They get up on stage, they're like, I want to thank God, I want to thank the Academy. It's stupid. Nobody's paying attention. But every now and then, a person hits it out of the park. So a few years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Joe Walker who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. Now, this is Hollywood, Bob. All the important people are in the front of the room, the actors, and the camera is scanning the crowd. You can see nobody's paying attention. This is film editing. Why should I pay attention? And Joe Walker gets on stage. He's British. He speaks very slowly and deliberately. He says, a lot of people don't know this, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Well, now the camera scans the crowd and you see people leaning in like, what's he talking about? And he says, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter, and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. All of a sudden, you see everybody laughing hysterically. He gets off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Time magazine said he was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards. Well done, Joe Walker. So one way you get better at things is by watching the people that are the best. If you want to be good at marketing, then watch good marketers, read good marketing books. Be very intentional about that. The second way, I've been blessed with lots of wonderful coaches and mentors throughout my career. One of my mentors was a gentleman by the name of Jim Rohn. And Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, you got to do the reps. I mean, even the smallest towns in America have a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, an Optimist Club, a Kiwanis Club. They got schools, they got churches, synagogues, temples, chambers of commerce. The people I'm working with, I'm like, you got to get your reps in. Go on podcasts. I mean, it's the same with you, Bob. I guarantee you, the first time you did this podcast, you stunk. And the second time you did it, you stunk, but you didn't stink as bad as the first time. And now that you've been doing it for a while, it's becoming a finely tuned machine. You're building up your confidence. The same techniques for speaking work for anybody that's in a job transition. Whatever you want to do, you got to watch the people that are best at it, and then you got to practice. How do I become that person?
You know, my experience is that when you hear that you're having some kind of career disruption, laid off, fired, whatever it is that you didn't control, you're going to go through a series of emotions.
Mhm.
If you were to coach someone, what's the one, two, three steps to take after you've heard that your job is gone? What would those three steps be?
Yeah, well, I've lived this myself. I mean, I once proposed to a woman many, many years ago, and she said no. And so I went to South America for 3 months, and I was on a boat on the Amazon River going from Belém to Manaus. And I had been mugged the day before. They stole my backpack, which had all my cash. It had all of my film for the last 2 months. And most importantly, it had my journal, which had 180 days worth of writing in it, and just gone. And I didn't think I could get any worse, Bob. And then I caught malaria on the Amazon. It's an easy way to lose 30 pounds in a week. And I was just so miserable. And one morning, I'm looking at the Amazon River and I watched the sunrise over it. And it was almost like God talking to me. And I realized, whoa, losing my journal was the same as losing my girlfriend. Like at first, I was in total shock, and then I became very depressed, and then I became very angry, and then I became indifferent. And it's the same with losing a job. I don't think you have to deny any of those emotions. I think all of those emotions are important to go through. But eventually, you got to get over it. You got to move on. I always cite the movie Rocky as one of my favorite movies. The thing I love about Rocky, there's nothing pretty about Rocky, but you knock him down, he always gets back up. That's what I always tell people is you can't lose if you keep on getting back up. People forget at the end of Rocky, the night before he has to fight Apollo Creed, he's sitting there in bed with Adrian. He's like, Adrian, I'm going to lose, but all I care about is going the distance with the champ. It's all I ever wanted to do. And people forget that at the end of Rocky, Apollo Creed wins. He beats Rocky. But Rocky went the distance, and because of that scene beforehand, you realize he fulfilled his goal, which is to go the distance. One of my favorite speakers is a guy by the name of Les Brown, and he was suicidal at one point in his life. He has a wonderful line. He says, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I would say the same thing for anybody that's out there in some kind of life transition. I mean, we've lost over 1 million white collar jobs in the last year because of artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of people out there that are feeling really down. But all you have to do is look at all these examples of people that have just had second acts that have been incredible. Who was the guy that he was selling aluminum siding until he was 48 years old and he was miserable. And so he quit his job, decided to try stand-up comedy, and thankfully, Rodney Dangerfield pursued something else he was good at. Everybody has something that they can do. It's not the end. It's always just an opportunity to start over.
How important are relationships and networking, maybe with people who you don't have a relationship with yet? How important is that during your job transition? And especially because, again, as we've said, if you're early on, you hurt, you're embarrassed, you want to pull the covers up over you and just shut the world out.
Yeah, so relationships are everything. You and I both know that, Bob. One of my mentors was a gentleman by the name of Zig Ziglar, and Zig used to say, you can get anything you want in life by helping others get what they want out of life. And so whenever I go in Danny Downer mood, where woe is me and everything is tough, I like to go to a soup kitchen or to the children's cancer wing at the hospital and realize, you know what, I don't have it as bad as some people. And I've always found that the best way to get things is to really give first, give very generously, help others. That's what I've always liked about in being in my mastermind groups is I'll go there with a specific problem that I want to solve. And I get so enamored listening to other people's problems and trying to solve their problems that I forget about my problem. And in the process of helping other people solve their problems, I realize, oh, I've actually solved my problem. And so the advice I would give to anybody that's feeling down is to really just get out there and give, 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 give. And you'd be amazed the universe responds to that.
Continuous learning, reading, or going to seminars, how does that play a role in helping someone to deal with the emotions and potentially reinvent themselves and go down a path that they are more potentially suited for?
Yeah, I love that question, Bob. I mean, this is my cup of tea. One of my mentors was a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones. And Charlie used to say, you'll be the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for two things, the books you read and the people you meet. So make sure you read lots of positive books that get you the right attitude. And make sure you surround yourself with people that lift you up all the time. And so I know plenty of readers that don't necessarily become effective leaders, but I can't name a single effective leader in history in any endeavor that was not also an avid reader. So this is what my soapbox that I jump on all the time to get people reading more. Plus, it'll extend your life too. President Ford, when he was president, a journalist once asked him what he read at the beginning of the day. He said, oh, I always read the sports page to start the day. And the media flipped out. They're like, wait a second, you're leader of the free world. Why don't you read the front page? He said, well, the sports page celebrates man's accomplishments. The front page only shows you his failures. I'm like, wow, lots of wisdom in that. I was watching a horrible show on TV last week called The News, and it just put me in a bad state of mind. And I'm like, you know what? I need to make a shift. And so I picked up a book and started reading a book, and I felt much better. I tell people you should read whatever you want to read. The research on this is very clear. It doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. But as I suggested earlier, if you want to get better at marketing, my suggestion is to read a lot of marketing books. If you want to become better in your sales, I mean, I'm constantly reading sales books and behavioral psychology books and behavioral economics. I was just reading a wonderful book by Annie Dew. She used to be a professional poker player, and now I don't know what her job title is now. I know she's a coach and probably a behavioral economist. She has a great book called Quit. You'll like this story, Bob, because you're in Chicago now. It tells the story of two different companies, and they were both started in 1890. One of them was Sears Roebuck, which I didn't realize Sears, when it started off in the retail service, it became so big that I believe in the 1960s, it represented 1% of America's gross domestic product. That's unbelievable to me. That's an incredible statistic. But then they made the Sears Tower in Chicago, and at the same time, competitors like Target and Walmart and Kmart were cutting into Sears business. And Sears was going through a tough time in the 1990s, and they had a decision to make. And so what they did, everybody thought, oh, Sears is doing poorly, but Sears had another branch to their business. It was financial services. And through the financial services division, they owned a stake in Dean Witter. They owned Coldwell Banker Realty. They had some really incredible assets, but they were stubborn and they decided that their identity was based. So this actually really applies to your audience, Bob. Their identity, because they started in retail, they were going to stay in retail. So they sold the profitable financial services companies for hundreds of millions of dollars. Those companies are now worth tens of billions of dollars. They stuck with the retail, and we all know that they completely failed and filed for bankruptcy. Nobody knows about Sears Roebuck anymore. The same year that Sears was created, there was a company called Philips. And Philips, they were in the lighting business. And they had the same problem. In the mid 1990s, they had a decision to make. And everybody had always associated them with lighting, but they also had another division in healthcare. And they made the opposite decision that Sears made. Rather than stick with what had worked with them 100 years earlier, they embraced the change and got rid of all the lighting services and focused on healthcare. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar company. It's very successful. I love that story. Again, the book is called Quit by Annie Duke, and she gives all kinds of wonderful examples like that throughout the book. But I think all of us come to transitions like that where we're trying to be stubborn. No, this is who I am. It really goes back to what you said earlier, Bob, is, well, your job isn't who you are. It's just what you do. And so that's why I really believe in the power of the pause. What do you believe in? What are your beliefs? What's important to you? And then design your life around that very intentionally rather than, well, I've been in retail for the last 50 years. I guess I should stick in retail. Well, maybe you should, but maybe you shouldn't. But I think there's power in pausing and assessing where you're at, where the economy's going, figuring things out like that. That's, again, I think your podcast is a real service to people, Bob, because I meet people all the time. They're in transitions and they don't know what to do. And I really think rather than rushing into something, I think this is why I read. Reading is reflection time. It's great for me. I look at what other people have done. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Some of the best mentors I've ever had came from books. I've never met Abraham Lincoln, but I can learn a ton from Abraham Lincoln based on his writings. Nelson Mandela is one of my favorite writers. Wow, how did this person exist? The same thing with Mahatma Gandhi. I'm like, these are people that just think in a totally different way. Steve Jobs thought in a totally different way. Finding out that Steve Jobs, he's a perfect example for your audience in transition. He creates Apple and he's thrown off his own board. And so what does he do? He has about $73 million left, and George Lucas is getting a divorce and he has to sell off different parts of his movie studio. So he sells for $5 million this little company called Pixar to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs invests personally like 55 million of his 73 million into Pixar. I had no idea that Steve Jobs, the way he became a billionaire wasn't through Apple, it was through Pixar. And then after he became a billionaire through Pixar, then he was brought back to Apple and became a billionaire many times over. And even when he passed away, he left his family. They're the number one shareholders of Disney. But he went through lots of transitions and lots of hard times. And so the very long-winded answer to your short question, Bob, is the reason I read is I find inspiration in the stories of others.
Annie, we've gone through so much great information here in this last half hour. If we leave our audience with just one thing to keep in mind that you think will help them in their job transition, what's that one thing?
Well, as a thank you to you, Bob, for having me on and listening to my stories and your audience having to listen to me, I wanted to give everybody a freebie. So if you go to freestorymap.com, map like a guide, freestorymap.com, I'm going to give everybody a complimentary 30-minute phone call where I'll listen to your story and figure out if there's anything I can do to help you create your well-crafted story. What this does for you is it'll show you, well, here's the story I should be using, and this is where I should be putting it. Maybe this is where I should be heading, the direction I should be choosing. And what this means to you is the peace of mind is you now have an actual system to convert your audiences into actual clients. You can get that at freestorymap.com. And Bob, I'll just end with whether I was teaching my little ones or my older ones as they left my classroom for the day, they always had to hear me repeat the same refrain. I said, remember, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. So let's all go out, do the right thing, and make this world a better place. You are making the world a better place, Bob, with all that you do. And I really appreciate you having me on your podcast today. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much. And I hope today's conversation with Dr. Danny fired you up, gave you the push to take the bold steps in your own career journey. And you should know that you don't have to face those changes alone. Together, we can turn uncertainty into momentum and momentum into results. Let's start building that future you've been dreaming about. Your next chapter is waiting, so let's make it happen. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bob. God bless.